The suitcase was by the door. My suitcase. Zipped up handles extended like someone had carefully prepared it for a short trip. But there was no destination, just an exit. Devin stood in the kitchen, arms folded, still wearing that smug half-smile he'd adopted ever since the check cleared. The lottery money had barely hit his account, but already his tone had shifted. "You can go now, Mom," he said, not even looking me in the eye. "This house, this money, it's mine. I won. Not you." He popped open a can of something fizzy, leaned against the counter like we were having a casual chat, as if he hadn't just gutted me in the space of a sentence. I didn't ask why. The part of me that might have begged had been slowly hollowed out in the weeks leading up to that moment, through whispered phone calls, closed doors, and little jokes at my expense that Ivy thought I couldn't hear. I picked up my coat from the hook by the door. Same coat I'd worn the night I stayed up with Devin after his first heartbreak. The fabric still held a faint trace of his cologne, like the house still remembered him before the money. The living room behind him was spotless now. Not a single cushion out of place, not a framed photo in sight. The old bookshelf I'd bought secondhand was gone, replaced by a flat-screen TV I hadn't dared touch. I paused, looking past him for one last glance. The window still caught the afternoon light, the same way it did when he was little, sitting cross-legged with a book, asking me how to sound out together. "Need help with your things?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't have that many." And I didn't. Not anymore. I rolled the suitcase out to the porch, step by step, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator behind me, the door clicking softly shut as I crossed into the quiet. The ticket had been mine, but the claim was his, for now. I can still see it. The bright yellow slip from the corner store, edges still warm from the printer. I'd played the same numbers since 1989, my wedding date, Devin's birthday, the year my father died. Numbers that meant something when the world still felt like it had rules. That Saturday, I'd stopped by the grocery store on my way home from work. The clerk already knew me. "Same ones, Mrs. Keene?" he asked, half smiling. I nodded. Routine. Comfort. A habit so small it kept me steady when everything else changed. When I got home, I set the ticket on the kitchen counter next to the mail. Devin was there, watching something on his phone, half listening, as I told him about a broken pipe at work and how the neighbor's cat had kittens again. He didn't look up until I said, "Don't touch that ticket. It's got my lucky numbers." He laughed. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll put it somewhere safe." It sounded harmless. He'd done that before, collected my things to keep the kitchen tidy. I didn't think twice. I was tired, and he was my son. You don't question your own blood over a scrap of paper worth $2. Now, I wish I had. After I left the house, I sat in the parking lot of the small motel I could afford for the night, tracing the memory like a bruise. The way he'd tucked that ticket into his pocket, smiling like he knew something I didn't. The way he'd looked at me when the winning numbers were announced, half shocked, half triumphant. It wasn't just greed that changed him. It was something older, something that had been quietly growing between us for years. A belief that I'd already given him enough that anything left was fair game. The lottery only gave him proof. That night, I opened my old wallet, where I'd kept every losing ticket since I could remember, all lined up in a small elastic band. The same numbers every week. The only thing in my life that never turned its back on me. And that was when I decided to find the receipt. The first time I saw Devin on television, I didn't recognize his voice. It had changed, rounder, louder, like someone trying to take up more space than they needed. His words were polished, coached even, but they came out of a mouth I'd wiped with napkins and kissed goodnight for years. He stood at the edge of some manicured lawn. I'd never seen a glass of something sparkling in his hand, ivy clinging to his side like an accessory. The caption beneath them read, "Local couple wins $6 million jackpot." Ivy laughed on cue when the reporter asked how it felt. Devin shrugged all charm. I guess I just got lucky, he said. Picked a bunch of numbers and hoped for the best. I watched from Nadine's couch, a blanket around my shoulders, even though I wasn't cold. Nadine sat beside me in silence, a half-finished crossword resting in her lap. The television glowed, filling the room with the sound of applause and the flash of camera shutters. Ivy held up a silver handbag to the reporters. He told me I never have to look at a price tag again. The camera panned across the front of the mansion, large stone pillars, double front doors, a fountain. I didn't know the address, but I could guess where it was, one of those gated developments on the edge of town where people used to drive slow, just to gawk. Then the voiceover called him an inspiration, said he was proof that dreams can come true, that anyone could go from nothing to something overnight. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just looked at the screen and noticed one thing: there was no mention of me. Not once. As if I hadn't been part of the story. As if the numbers had never lived in my kitchen drawer beside the napkins and the batteries. I stood up, walked to Nadine's desk and opened my purse. Inside, I found the old grocery receipt still folded in half. Timestamp clear. It was from the day I bought the ticket. The bell above the door chimed like it always did when I stepped into Klein's Market. It smelled like dust and detergent, just like it had 20 years ago. Nothing much had changed, same linoleum floors, same display of dollar scratchers near the counter. Mindy was behind the register, her hair pulled back with a blue pen stuck through the bun. She looked up, blinked, then smiled. "Hey, Miss Marlene, you missed your usual Thursday ticket." I stepped closer, unfolded the crumpled receipt from my coat pocket, and laid it on the counter. "This was the last one I bought here. Do you remember?" She picked it up, nodded slowly. "Sure. You came in that morning, told me to run the usual numbers. Said they were the same ones you'd played since forever. Your son's birthday, right? And our anniversary," I said, quietly. She looked at me more closely then. "This about that story on the news, I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I remember," she said, firmer now. "You were standing right there. You even double-checked the numbers before you paid, like always." It was steadying to hear it out loud from someone else. I wasn't losing my grip. I wasn't imagining things. I cleared my throat. "Do you have the camera footage from that day?" Mindy frowned. "You mean from the 14th? I nodded. She sighed. "No, sorry. The system only keeps the last 2 weeks. Overwrites itself unless someone saves it. Cheap setup." I stared at the counter for a moment. The receipt felt suddenly heavier in my hand. "But I remember what you said," she added. "You always said it. Every single time." I folded the receipt back into my pocket. "Thank you." That night, I sat in Nadine's kitchen and wrote down every detail I could recall, what I wore, the time of day. Mindy's words, the color of the weathered ticket stub. I signed the page and dated it. Then I picked up the phone and called Justine. Justine answered on the second ring. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, maybe more, but she picked up like no time had passed. "Hey, stranger," she said. "What's going on? I need your help," I said. "And I need you to believe me before I explain." She was quiet for a beat. "Okay, I'm listening." I told her everything. The ticket, the numbers, the receipt, Mindy's memory. Devin's voice smug and certain as he told me to pack my things. I told her about the news clips, the mansion, Ivy's designer bags, and how the winning numbers matched the ones I'd played every week for decades. Justine didn't interrupt. When I finished, she asked one question. "Do you have anything digital?" That stopped me. I hung up and went straight to my email. It took 15 minutes of digging through spam folders and old confirmations, but I finally found it, an auto-generated message from the state lottery app. "Your numbers have been saved for Saturday's drawing." Dated 2 days before Devin filed the claim. I forwarded it to her. 20 minutes later, Justine called back. "That's solid," she said. "Not everything, but enough to start." You need to stay calm and document everything. No contact with Devin, no threats, no drama. I haven't said a word to him since the day he kicked me out. Good. Keep it that way. She guided me through the steps, drafting a statement attaching copies of the receipt, the email, and a notarized note describing my regular pattern of play. She handled the formal complaint to the Lottery Commission. It wasn't a lawsuit yet. Not officially. But it started the clock. You're not the first person who's been taken advantage of, she said. But most don't have anything to prove it. You do. After we hung up, I sat at Nadine's kitchen table, listening to the soft hum of her fridge. I pulled out my notebook and made a list of every item Devin had moved or touched the day I bought that ticket. Then I wrote down the date I'd be showing up at his front gate. The gate was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just never been this close before. Devin hadn't invited me since the money came in, not even for a cup of coffee. I stood outside the steel bar's gravel, crunching beneath my shoes, and pressed the call button. A moment later, the speaker crackled. Ivy's voice, syrupy and sharp. Yes, it's Marlene. There was a pause, a laugh. Then the gate clicked open. I walked slowly up the driveway, past the new landscaping, past the luxury cars. When I reached the door, it swung open before I could knock. Ivy leaned against the frame, barefoot, wearing silk. We thought you might show up eventually, she said, smirking. Devin came into view behind her, holding a champagne flute, still dressed in what looked like yesterday's clothes. He grinned, exaggerated. You here for money? He asked. Bit late for that, Mom. I held his gaze. No, I'm just here to let you know I've contacted the lottery fraud division. He snorted. You're joking. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder. This is the email confirmation showing I bought the ticket 2 days before your claim. And this, I slid out the notarized affidavit, is my statement of routine play and purchase history. He blinked, but the smile didn't fall right away. Not until he glanced at the dates. Ivy stepped forward. Wait, what is? This Devin's eyes flicked over the document, then up at me. The smugness had drained from his face. You're seriously doing this? You made it clear I wasn't part of your future, I said. So I'm just making sure the past is documented. I handed him the folder. I suggest you forward this to your lawyer. Then I turned and walked away, the click of my shoes against the stone louder than it needed to be. By the time I reached the gate, I didn't need to look back to know they were still standing there watching. The silence told me enough. The call came just after 7 in the morning. I watched the screen light up Devin Mobile and let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, he called again. Then again. No voicemail. No message. Just silence stretching between each attempt, like he couldn't bring himself to say what he wanted in words. I already knew. Justine had forwarded me the email. Late the night before the Lottery Commission was officially reviewing both claims. My affidavit receipts purchase history and app confirmation had passed initial screening. Devin's would be placed on hold until further notice. I went back to Nadine's that afternoon. The sun was out, and the air had that crisp bite it always got before spring finally settled in. I climbed the stairs to the garage apartment, unlocked the door, and let the stillness wrap around me. There wasn't much, just a couch, a lamp, a second-hand table I used for writing. But it was mine, and it didn't echo with someone else's laughter. The next morning, I walked to Klein's for groceries. Mindy was behind the counter, humming to herself, same as always. She didn't ask questions, just rang up my usual slide a cup of coffee across the counter and winked. On the house. I smiled, said thank you, and tucked the receipt into my coat pocket. Back at the apartment, I took the mug to the window, watched cars pass, watched children on their way to school dragging backpacks behind them like anchors. My phone buzzed again. Another missed call. No message. I set it face down on the table and opened my notebook. There was still more to write. Not for court, Not for evidence, but for me. I wrote down every time he borrowed money without asking, every time Ivy rolled her eyes, when I entered the room, every time I said nothing. Then I tore out the page, folded it once, and burned it in Nadine's old ashtray. Tomorrow, I'd be meeting with Justine again. It started with the silence. Devon's posts disappeared from every platform. No more beach photos, no more champagne toasts, no more quotes about hard work and destiny. Ivy vanished next. Her accounts were locked or deleted, her name scrubbed from the articles that had once called her lottery royalty. Then came the leak. A local news blog ran the headline, "Dispute filed over lottery ticket. Original owner steps forward." No names at first, but the comments section filled in the blanks fast. People remembered the interview, the numbers, the story that didn't quite line up. Devon tried to get ahead of it. He told a different reporter that he'd received bad advice and that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. He called me confused in passing, like my memory had blurred, like this was just a case of a sweet old woman forgetting which ticket was hers. I didn't answer. Not to him. Not to the press. I sat in Justine's office, hands folded as she slid a document across the table. "This is the offer," she said. "It's clean, quiet, no lawsuit, no trial." The paper spelled it out, full transfer of winnings to me. 100%. In exchange, no public statements, no further claims, no contact. It should have felt like a win, but it just felt quiet. I signed without hesitation. The pen moved smoothly. My name looked steady on the page. Afterward, I walked out into the sunlight, tucked the signed copy into my bag, and kept moving. I didn't look back at the office or the street, or the world I used to live in before numbers and names twisted everything sideways. I went home, if you could call the little apartment that. The air smelled like clean paper and brewed coffee. On the table was the old lottery ticket, now in a clear protective sleeve. Not framed, not displayed, just resting beside a photograph of my husband holding Devon as a baby. I placed the settlement beside it. Then I made a call to a realtor in another town. The house sat at the edge of a quiet street, lined with oak trees and cracked sidewalks. It wasn't much one-story pale brick shutters that needed painting, but it was mine. No gate, no security cameras, just a mailbox with my name on it and a porch light that worked when I flipped the switch. I paid in full. No mortgage. No signatures but mine. The woman who handed me the keys asked if I'd lived in the area before. I told her no, but I'd been looking for peace. She said I'd picked a good spot. 2 days after moving in, I went to the town library. It smelled like paper and floor polish, and the front desk clerk smiled without needing a reason. I filled out a form and arranged a recurring donation in my husband's name, nothing grand, just enough to keep the large print section stocked. He'd loved reading before the illness took that from him. I didn't mention Devon, not once. The week passed without fanfare. I unpacked boxes, learned the names of the birds outside my kitchen window, found a cafe with quiet corners and a server who remembered I took my coffee black. Then the letter came. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting, messy from rushing, half-slanted. Devon's. It was one page. No greeting. No apology. Just I didn't think you'd go through with it. That was it. No mention of the money. No mention of Ivy or the house or the headlines. He didn't ask how I was. I folded the letter in half and placed it in the drawer beside the settlement papers. Not out of sentiment, just to keep things tidy. Outside, the wind picked up. I stepped onto the porch and watched the leaves swirl across the driveway. The air smelled like something new, like cold dirt and wood smoke. Tomorrow, I'd plant tulip bulbs along the front fence, the kind that took their time but always came back. I never opened the letter again. It stayed where I put it, tucked in the drawer beside the paperwork, folded once soft at the edges. Not forgotten, Just finished. The framed ticket hangs in the hallway, now quiet and unremarkable to anyone but me. It rests beside a photo of my husband taken the year Devon turned 10. He's holding a fishing rod sun on his face, that familiar half smile, like he knew more than he ever said out loud. Most days I don't look at either for long. I pass them when I move from the kitchen to the garden, when I go to grab my coat or drop off the mail. They're just there, reminders of what's been lost and what's been reclaimed. This morning, I baked a loaf of bread. Nothing fancy, just the old recipe I kept taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet. As the scent filled the house, I opened the window over the sink and let the breeze carry it out to the porch. It felt like something small and right, like claiming a piece of my own life again. Later, I sat at the dining table with a blank sheet of paper. Not legal forms yet, just a draft in my own words. I wrote down what I wanted, where things should go, who should have what, and which names would not appear. Devon's wasn't there. Not from spite, just truth. He made his choices. So did I. When the bread cooled, I sliced the end and wrapped the rest for Nadine. She'd stop by later, probably with a new book she thought I'd like, and a story about someone's dog tearing up her flower beds. Before she arrived, I poured myself a cup of tea and stood by the window. The light hit the hallway just right, casting a glow across the ticket and the photo beside it. There were no headlines now, no applause, no one watching. Just the sound of wind and warm bread and the steadiness of a life built back by hand.